So on behalf of the School of Business, I'd like to welcome you all tonight. It's a real privilege to have you here. And I tried to get around and meet as many people as I could. I'm Dr. Strombeck. I'm the Dean of the School of Business. So it's a real honor to have you here. Thank you for coming. The mixer is over, but there's still food back there. So if you get hungry or thirsty, feel free to go in the back and grab some more to eat and drink. And this is something very special. We try to do this at least once a semester. This semester we have 4 panel members for our event. Our event is called A View from the Top. And what we're trying to do tonight is talk about top leadership, CEOs and VPs that have experience and have experience as a Christian leader. So I hope you enjoy the night. I'm going to pray and then introduce the individual that really was the major impetus behind tonight's activity, our event. So let me take a minute and pray for the event, and would you bow your head with me, please? Heavenly Father, we know that every good and perfect gift comes from you. Lord, we know this evening is something special, and so we pray you'd open our ears and our eyes and our hearts to what you would have for us. Thank you for all the hands that had some part in making this event something extraordinary. And we just pray for your blessing over the evening. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Santiago, come down, Santiago. It's hard for me to explain. So I run the business school, but I also teach MBA classes. Santiago is one of our MBA students. And I can't put into words how much he did in preparation for this event, along with Erica and your wonderful help as well. But Santiago, logistics, communications, things on the marketing side, so he's done an amazing job for us. And if you don't mind giving him a round of applause with me, that'd be great. So I'm going to turn the mic over to him and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Well, we started with this idea about, say, 3 to 4 months ago to have CEOs come and investorpreneurs as well from the area to give their story and to help ignite the next generation of business leaders, because ultimately the MBA students here and people within William Jessup University were the future. So that was one of the ideas, and I also wanted to give a legacy for the future MBA students to try to continue. So Erica and myself, along with various other MBA students here, have helped a lot with I can't count how many people have helped. It's not just me, it's everyone. So ultimately, we're here for the same reason. We're here for God, yes, and we're here to try to give back. So with that said, let me go ahead and introduce Erica Diaz, who's going to be our MC for tonight. So Erica's also been instrumental in putting this event on. She is currently vice president with the American River Bank and owner of an advertising firm. She's also an MBA candidate here at William Jessup University. Please welcome me in welcoming Erica Diaz. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have just a couple of housekeeping notes for us. If you would please silence your cell phones. Give you a second to do that in the event you have not done that already. For those of you who need to know where the facilities are, both the ladies' room and the gentlemen's room are across the courtyard right next to the elevator. So please take breaks as desired. We have a 2-hour program, most of which is about you tonight. So we really wanted this to be interactive. You'll see that you have note cards. If there's extras, feel free to take them. We'd like to see you challenge our panel tonight. They've all been given fair warning that is the expectation, and they've asked for some really tough questions to be posed to them. So the majority of the program this evening is for your questions to be answered. So please use those. Like I said, steal your neighbors. If you're stumped, give it to your friend. We'll select those and be going through those at the end of the evening. As well, we have 20 minutes at the end where you'll be able to meet one-on-one with all of the presenters. They'll come off the stage and have time to answer any questions that maybe you didn't want asked or answered in a public forum. So a couple of things additionally, I want to make sure, and Santi, if you would you start passing around the forms that we have? I have to echo what Dr. Strombeck and many others have said about Santi. He is a true leader on this campus for all of us in the MBA program. And one of the things that we have really wanted to start is an MBA club. For those of us who are in the program now, I'm part of the very first cohort, so I didn't have an MBA group to go to for advice or mentorship, and I would really like to provide that to the cohorts that are going to follow. If you're interested in being a part of that group, whether that would be as a mentor in the community, in your business, or someone that might provide a service to the MBA group and desire interaction with them, please put your name down. We won't sign you up for any committees or not too many committees without asking. I promise. And then additionally, if you're interested in the MBA program, I have to tell you, I love coming to this campus. I've been coming here for over a year now, and I'm on the end of my program, and I really don't want it to end. I absolutely have grown. The depth, not only my personal spiritual growth, but also my business knowledge. I tell everyone, I wish I had done it 20 years ago. But whenever you do it, you can always finish strong. And so I encourage those of you who may be hearing that call to pursue your MBA or another degree that might be on your heart. And as someone who is incredibly pleased with the program, I would like to make myself available to you. If you have questions, I'll be honest about the rigor, the challenges, the obstacles, and how it's all worth it. So if you would like to, please reach out to me. I'll throw some of my other cohort members under the bus. Carol Viola's here, Chris Hill is here. I've never met such wonderful people, leaders in every way, and I know even without having asked them before, they would answer questions and be supportive to anyone interested in a heartbeat. So with that said, let's get on to it. So we're gonna meet our CEO panel. You see 4 empty chairs. They're not gonna be empty very long. Let's begin with Aaron Klein. He is the CEO at Riskalyze. Aaron's career has largely been at the intersection of finance and technology. As co-founder and CEO, he led the company to twice being named one of the world's top 10 most innovative companies in finance by Fast Company magazine. Today, over 180 Riskalyzers serve thousands of advisors who have aligned the world's investments with millions of investors' risk numbers. In his spare time, Aaron co-founded a school project for orphans and vulnerable children in Ethiopia. Investment News has honored him as one of the industry's top 40 under 40 executives. Obviously, he's just not very accomplished. Could you work harder, sir? Please join me in welcoming Aaron Klein. Our next panelist is Mark Haney. We call him an investorpreneur. He is passionate about helping dedicated entrepreneurs grow their businesses. He's a serial entrepreneur and investor who's built and sold several multi-million-dollar companies. In the early 90s, he purchased a video rental store business. Those youngins in here probably haven't ever seen one of those. They did exist at one time. There was something, a world before Netflix, and grew it to 12 locations. A few years later, with his brother, he acquired a professional video surveillance reseller, which became a surveillance technology company with over $200 million in annual revenue, nearly 300 employees. In 2010, he led the merger of the 2 largest independent security distributors in the US, resulting in a company with annual sales of nearly $400 million. His greatest passion, though, is his family. He's been married for 31 years, has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. His hobbies include, of course, family time, health and fitness, and building businesses. Join me in welcoming Mark Haney. Next, Jim Edgar. He's a retired regional marketing director for Boeing, a tiny little firm you've probably never heard of. Mr. Edgar has been associated with the air transportation industry for 45 years, both commercial and military experience in various passenger and cargo positions. Jim attained the rank of captain in the U.S. Air Force and served in the staffs of 2 presidents while assigned to Air Force One in Washington, D.C. He also managed passenger and cargo terminals in the U.S. and the Middle East. Jim retired from Boeing after more than 30 years, and his last position as Regional Director of Cargo Marketing for nearly 25 of those 30 years. He was on the Board of Directors of International Air Cargo Association and chair of its Education and Research Committee. Jim is married with a grown son and daughter and has 2 infant grandchildren. He's my favorite because he works in marketing. Please join me in welcoming him. Sorry, guys. And last but definitely not least, Jennifer Harris, CEO at American Hydroponics. As president and CEO, she has a passion for AmHydro and the role that we're playing in changing food production throughout the world. She's a native of Northern California and received her bachelor's degree from Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego. After graduating, she lived and worked in Frankfurt, Germany before returning to California to work in the San Francisco Financial District. She has over 25 years of experience working in a variety of industries, from long-established GE to Silicon Valley startups, resulting in their rapid growth and constant innovation. While at GE Financial Assurance, a division of GE, Jenny earned a black belt in Six Sigma business management strategy. This broad base of experience has given her the ability to bring best practices from many different industries to the newly emerging controlled environment agriculture industry. In addition to the business experience, she's actively involved in the development of new products in their R&D greenhouses. Join me in welcoming her, please. So I failed my first test. I'm sorry, Dr. Hill, I didn't mean to let you down. There we go. Just don't mind me skipping past those slides. So our first 3 questions were provided by our MBA cohort teams, and we're going to move through them relatively quickly. Each speaker has 3 minutes to provide their TED Talk style answer to these questions. While you're listening to them, get your cards out, and when this spurs a thought, you can write down your own question. We'll collect those cards at 7 p.m., and as I mentioned before, we'll have the opportunity for your questions to be answered. Our first question that we're going to begin with tonight. WJU has a focus on creating highly employable students. That's not always drawn favorable response from the academic world. As a leader in your industry, regularly evaluating the workforce talent pool, we'd like to hear what advice or insights you can share for our university students, both undergraduate and graduate level. Specifically, what can students do to equip themselves to be the most competitive in an ever-changing job market? As fast as you can, we'd like to hear your top 3 insights, rapid fire, to kick off our panel tonight. We're going to kick it off with Jennifer.
First and foremost, just show up to work. So many people don't. And those of us that are probably older laugh at it, but it's true. Just show up to work. Understand what your job duties are, whether it is your actual job or whether it's an assignment that your supervisor or manager has given you. Understand what the expectations are, and then do everything possible to meet and exceed those expectations.
Wow, that was great. I'm impressed. Is that the black belt coming out? Just bam.
I'm all about efficiency.
Mic drop. Don't drop the mic. Okay. And we'll move right on to, that was great, Jennifer. We'll move on to Jim.
Okay, well, I'd like to first thank Dr. Strombeck and Erica and Santi. I think we all should do that since they made this possible. I think the very first thing that I thought of when we were posed this question ahead of time was that you should be differentiating yourself. And by that I mean you have a career ahead of you, you're presumably going to be applying for a job. You need to have things stand out, and one of the best ways that a person can do that, of course, is try to do their best but excel at whatever they do. So develop a reputation for diligence, faithfulness, commitment. That'd be number one. Number two, each of us have been given God-given strengths. You know, some people are good at quantitative analysis, other people are better at relationships. So find out what your strength is and really leverage it. Really spend time on that, developing it, making sure that you do that to the best of your ability. And finally, and hopefully this is in rapid enough order here, in terms of deciding what the Lord would have you do, I think it's really important, besides spending time in prayer, that you really research and do a good job of exploring different opportunities at the front end. And then, of course, at the point that you're ready to make a move or you're applying for a job, really throw your whole self into it. I mean, do your homework, develop questions. You should have as many questions for the interviewer as they do for you. And it doesn't mean that you overwhelm them, you overpower them, but make sure that you answer your questions that you're interested in, and they're sure that you've done your homework in finding out about their firm and them as much as possible.
Oh, okay. I love it. You guys are you're too quick for me. I said 3 minutes.
We're saving our time.
My 28-point
I know
plan.
you are, and I absolutely love it. Our next response, Mark. Now, Mark, give me 3 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
All right. I have a radio show. I usually go 48 minutes. Is that okay?
That might be a little
good
long.
with commercials. I'm thinking to myself, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? So, I mean, one of the first things I might be thinking if I was you is, what do I love doing? And I don't know, how many of you guys have decided that yet? Anybody decided, I know what I want to do? We got Garrett in the back. Okay, some of you guys, you know what you want to do, and I think sometimes you don't know what you want to do, and that's okay, but maybe think about, what are you good at, right? And lean that way, and I like I like what I've heard about showing up. You gotta show up, not just show up for work every day, but you gotta show up, decide what you want to do, and then get after it. And I think the sooner you get after it, the sooner you go all in on what you want, the sooner you're going to start making some progress. And the other thing I heard about is differentiation. And I wouldn't be afraid to stand out, right? I wouldn't be afraid to do something different. And I think sometimes we get a little bit caught up in that. I want to go through the norm. Well, that's not how you get a job, right? I have a couple of my teammates here in the audience, and one of them, we did a job fair here 5 or 6 months ago, and one of my teammates stood out. I was not here, but I heard the story. I've shared it on my radio show. We were tearing down the booth after the job fair and trying to struggling with it to get the booth put away and that kind of thing. And getting those pop-up tents, and the person doing it was struggling a little bit. And guess what happens? Lauren comes over and says, let me help you with that, right? Where everybody else is walking by and says, let me help you put that away. And Caroline, who was struggling with it, said, hi, I'm Caroline Gaines. And Lauren Fenner and Caroline Gaines had a connection that was memorable. She stood out. And next thing you know, I see Lauren and I now work very closely together, but it all started with showing up at a job fair, showing up at an event like this, but getting yourself noticed. Don't be a wallflower. I've been a wallflower a lot of times in my life. I've learned it doesn't get you that far. So show up, come in with a differentiation, and don't forget why. Right? We all know what we love. We're beginning to discover what we love, especially in these younger ages. Even at the older ages, you start beginning to understand what you love. You go after that, but don't forget why. Don't forget why you're doing it. That's, I think, probably the most important thing.
Thank you so much. Aaron?
Okay. Well, thank you again to William Jessup University for hosting this, and it's a great privilege to be here with all of you. I thought of this through the lens of trying to prepare for actually going, and doing the interview and trying to get the job. And so a few things from I guess I would say the employer's side of the table. We've hired a few folks. In fact, we've got just about 10 of the exceptionally employable Jessup graduates working at our company now, and we love them. One of them was hired as my executive assistant in early 2013, and today is my chief of staff and runs big pieces of the company. and she does a great job. She basically runs the company, but don't tell anybody I said that or I won't have a job. So anyway, here's the first thing for me. We find a lot of people who come in and they say, I just really want to work for your company. And we say, which job are you interested in? And they say, I don't really care, I'll do any of them. I just really want to work for your company. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of use for that, right? Like, we love fans, but we generally prefer that they be customers, you know? And so when somebody wants to come in, we love passion for our culture and our organization, but you know, at the end of the day, like, our managers have a specific budget to hire a specific role to get a specific job done, and we don't have a lot of use for people who come in and say, I'm a generalist, I'll do anything. Right? I can do anything. I'm not particularly good at any one thing, but I will do anything. Right? So my advice would be kind of along the lines of what some others have said. Like, you know what you're good at. Don't be afraid to be specific about that. In a job interview, you can absolutely demonstrate how your skills and your ability to think and your education have prepared you to adapt and learn and be able to help cover other things. But don't be scared to be focused and say, I'm really good at this piece. My number 2 point would be custom design your resume to fit the job that you're looking for. I know some folks who sort of saw that as like almost unethical, like, oh, I got to be the same person to everybody. No, it's okay to custom design your resume to point out why you're a great fit for that particular job and what they're looking for, as long as you're being honest with what the resume says. And the final piece I would say is we're always impressed when somebody custom designs their interview and comes in and has all kinds of great questions for us. It's clear, somebody said that, it's clear they've done their homework, right? That they have thought about the job that they want to have. And we often have, said good candidate, interesting candidate, all the way up to the end. And we always ask, what questions do you have for us? And we've been blown away sometimes by questions and said, this is the person we're looking for. They've got that inquisitive mind and they've got that ability to make a point. And we think that they can be a great addition to our organization.
Excellent. Let's move on to question number 2. So not everyone here is a student. Certainly, we're interested in your leadership, your holistic leadership. So question number 2 that came from the MBA program. In your role, you're clearly a leader, but we know you're also a Christ follower. How does this leader-follower relationship play out for you? What was the most challenging situation that you found yourself in as a leader wherein your faith was tested? And how did you handle this as a Christian? Jim, would you kick this one off for us?
Yeah, I'm going to have to deviate just a little bit, Eric, because I actually thought of 3 things. But I talked about differentiation during the answer to the first question. And I think this is an area where you really need to differentiate yourself. Your testimony ought to be visible, okay? And again, you don't browbeat people about your faith, your relationship with Jesus Christ. But I think you ought to be different. I think your convictions, your lifestyle should show, okay? We're supposed to be a light to the world. So I thought of 3 things in my experience. They aren't necessarily specific situations as much as they are specific instances when I could point to my Christian faith influenced how I conducted myself. The first one would be, since there isn't anybody from France here that I know of, we compete with Airbus, and they're a very worthy competitor, but to put it diplomatically, they adhere to a little bit different discipline in terms of business practices. And I'll leave that to your imagination. And that presents difficulties for us. And we aren't perfect at Boeing, no company is, but we really do make a good faith effort to do things ethically and above board. And in fact, we're ruled by the U.S. government regulations, and we have to certify our compliance every year, every single employee that deals with customers. So they're in dealing oftentimes with customers, particularly in certain parts of the world. They ask us for things that Airbus willingly offers, and we can't meet those, so we have to no bid oftentimes request for proposal, which results in no potential at all for a very, very large sale. So that would be number one, and hopefully everybody at Boeing adheres to that. Number two, and this is a personal philosophy of mine, in my position, we did a lot of very detailed and, as you can imagine, technical with an airplane, analytical work during the course of sales campaigns. And when you do that, you can kind of cook the books. You can kind of put your thumb on the scale, as they say, and have things turn out the way it would be more favorable for you. But I'm a really, really firm believer in using as conservative assumptions and approaches as possible. And I've had really good success with our teams in having customers say, that's too conservative. So I'd rather be corrected that I was too conservative than I overextended. And the last thing involves personal relationships. Obviously, in a sales environment overseas, you have lots of opportunities to do things that wouldn't be pleasing to the Lord or your family. So I made it a rule of thumb during the 25 years of intensive international travel of every single day, regardless of where I was, which continent I was, I called home. So made sure that was a matter of accountability, and it was also a matter of contact to give my wife a resource when I wasn't there. So I'd like to think that contributed to my longevity and a happy home.
Mark, we'd love to hear your response to this question about leading, but also following.
As an entrepreneur, as a small business person, I think so often we feel like maybe the underdog. And it reminds me of the story in the Bible about David and Goliath. And I think so I have 13 businesses now. I've sold some businesses earlier, which was mentioned in the introduction. I remember probably the time where I felt most like I needed to step up as a David, and it was when we had a threat. We had built our company through a lot of hard knocks and a lot of rocky road and a lot of prayer and survival, and ended up having a pretty successful company right here in Rockland. In fact, a mile and a half from here. We got to about 30 million in sales, and then we got this threat, right? This big billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company came in and said, hey, we want to buy you guys. And we're like, my brother and I thought to ourselves, oh, wow, should we take this offer? Well, what they said is, if you don't take our offer, we're going to put you out of business. We're like, oh, wow. And they said, we know your business model. We know what you do. We actually like it. We had a centralized distribution center of security products. We ship stuff all over the country. Our main competition was another billion-dollar company with brick and mortar branches all over the country, a division of Honeywell. And we had learned to compete pretty well against those brick and mortar branches, but then we get this threat from this even larger distributor. What do? Do you take the offer, or do you step up and fight? And I think what we decided to do on that day and at that time was we looked within, but we looked up above, and we decided, we're not going to take the offer. But we also remembered that, hey, they liked us for a reason. Maybe we're doing something right. And we thought, we've actually learned some knowledge over this last several years through these hard knocks. We actually had some secret sauce that nobody really knew about. Maybe we ought to go all in on what we know, right? Maybe we ought to step up and take on both Goliaths in this particular situation. And we doubled down, tripled down, huge lines of credit, and for us, and we started opening up our own branches, except for they were internal branches, right? We had a centralized distribution model, so they were desks and computers and phones. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we started competing against them in a different way. And in the end, we ended up coming up with a victory. You heard the story. We merged the two. We're the largest video security distributor in the country. We merged with the other largest general line security distributor, and now we're the largest security distributor in the world, multi-billion-dollar. So it worked. We took on the Goliath. I guess now we are the Goliath. I'm out. I'm now back to small business stuff, but I'm happy that we were able to have the courage to stand up to the big Goliath.
Great story. Aaron?
I thought this was a really interesting question. That's a great story, by the way.
It is.
I love that. I thought this was a really interesting question because, it's very challenging to be faced with, decisions, particularly where you're trying to balance competing interests. My mind was sort of brought when I was reading this question to that verse of scripture that says to act justly and love mercy and walk humbly. And, how do you make the decision, how do you balance the decision of acting justly when you're having to deal with somebody's career, when you're having to deal with an employee, that has a problem? When you're having to deal with an employee who actually is trying very hard but actually isn't performing. When you're having to deal, those are the tougher ones, right? There's all kinds of issues there, and I don't think that I've come up with any fantastically great answer to that question yet, with the exception that, at least for me, I feel like it's my job to walk the extra mile for the people who have entrusted their careers to our organization to the maximum extent possible that I can do that without crossing over into sort of violating my fiduciary duty to our shareholders who've entrusted us with their capital to run the business. And that's a hard balance to find. It's not an easy one, but it just strikes me that a lot of times it would be easier to say, this person is not working out. Time to move on. We try to take that extra mile. Doesn't always work. Sometimes people are just a bad fit for a job, and frankly, the best thing for them is to find the right fit for them where they can thrive, and it's probably the best thing for the business as well. But those are the decisions that I struggle with the most from this perspective, because I certainly want to be known. I want to bring the right kind of credit to my testimony, and I want to be known as somebody who acts justly, and that's tough. It's a tough thing to balance, I think, in the business world.
Thank you so much. Jennifer.
Yeah. First of all, let me just say, I hope you guys are appreciating how much experience and diversity in the business world you have up here. I mean, I'm really blown away just by their stories and everything. It's really great. So, anyway, so my story starts back a little bit in 2011. I'd been a business consultant for 10 years. I'd been at GE, of course. I'd been at all sorts of startups. Then in the .com that. When you hear those of us that have been at startups, you hear things like, well, I was employee number 38, and we grew to over 500 employees, and that was kind of my story. I'd done a lot of things, and so I moved up to Humboldt County. I did some business consulting. I'd been in the financial district of San Francisco, and now I'm up in Humboldt County, and I'm doing business consulting, and I got tired of it. Got tired of running after that business every single day, looking to pay your bills. So I applied for a couple of jobs. One was the director of the airport up there, which I was well qualified for. Another one was the dean of admissions for a college up there, which I was well qualified for. And I just didn't get anyone in any job. And I was like, God, what is going on? I usually interview really well. I mean, I don't think I'd ever interviewed and not gotten a job offer. And so a recruiter called me and said, there's this company, American Hydroponics, that wants to hire you. They need an accountant. And I'm like, an accountant? Really? Okay. And I'm like, isn't it that grow company? I mean, how many of you are familiar with Humboldt County? Anybody? How many of you are familiar with what Humboldt County is known for? How many of you are familiar with what hydroponics are known for? Thank you very much. Okay, let me just say, American Hydroponics has 99% of its business in food production. Let me just put that out there. So I took this, I went there, I interviewed, and it was a small company. Of course, I came way overdressed. They're grow people. Even though they weren't involved in the cannabis industry, that's who and what they were. And I'm like, really? They offered me a job, and I just knew that was the job God had for me. And I'm like, really? I mean, it paid way more than it should have paid, which was in what I was looking for. And I was just really gone. And I can remember telling friends at church who were close, business colleagues, really? And they're like, if this is where you think you need to be, take the job. And I took the job, and it was a humbling job. It was below my qualifications. It was kind of an entry-level job. It was, it just wasn't my dream job. And a few years, 2 years into it, the owner had asked me, kind of stepped up to a few things, and he said, look, I want to sell off, I want to retire, I want to sell off one side of my business. Will you help me do this? And so I helped him through this whole transaction. And literally every day I'm like, I'm not wild about this job, but God, I am going to perform my very best for it. And so we walked through that, and through this process he said, are you interested in buying my business? I'm looking for an exit plan. No, I hadn't ever really thought about it, but let me think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I prayed about it. It was like, okay, and it was with another gentleman in the company who had started the same time as I did, and he was, so we do horticultural, we manufacture growing systems for food. We do large commercial systems, we've shipped to over 65 countries in the world. We have, over 250 farms in the world. I knew nothing about growing. I knew nothing about greenhouses, nothing about agriculture, but I knew about business. And so Scott and I got together. We went to what we jokingly referred to as marriage counseling. That's a business consultant who kind of said, are your skills compatible? Because we were not friends outside of business. We only knew each other inside the company. And it turns out they were. And so we bought the business together. And 56 days later, Scott died one night of a heart attack. He left work on his bicycle because he rode his bike to work. And the next morning, his girlfriend called me, and my niece who lives with me said, Scott's on the phone. And he never calls me. We have no relationship outside of work. I'm like, well, that's weird. And I call her back, and she said, Jenny, this is Chris. Scott died last night. And it's just shocking. Even now, it takes my breath away. And that was 2.5 years ago, and I knew nothing about the industry. And I was not the face of the company. Scott was the face of the company because he liked to be out there, and he was the salesperson, and he knew the industry. Everybody in the industry knew him. So before we even could wrap our heads around it, a press release went out because someone found out about it into all the industry magazines that Scott Kornberg had passed away and what was to be done. He was the owner of American Hydroponics, and nowhere was my name mentioned. So I had to completely lean on God. My first stop after home when I got that phone call was to my brother who was a pastor to say, Paul, what can I do? And he said, you know what? He said, I'm there for you. And he quit his job after 25 years as a pastor, and he came to work with me. And that's how God takes care of you. And in everything you do, you seek God first. And I didn't want that job. I didn't want to do it. It was beneath me and it was below me. But I love what I do now. I love what we do with the customers that we have. Sorry, I took up my few minutes from before.
You're entitled. Thank you for sharing that story. Oh, really moved. We'll move on to question number 3. We've heard it said, if I could go back and tell my younger self blank, I would say blank. What would that be for you, and how might that have shaped your current situation? Mark, we're going to kick this one off.
Just be you. I think if I could go back to any time in my life and I needed to give myself some advice, just be you. I don't know if this has happened to you, but you get, I got so that I was trying to, at times, maybe be something I'm not, maybe even not sure what I was, and maybe not even being comfortable being who I am. I'm a C student from Oakmont High School. I'm here talking to MBAs, and and 10 years ago, I would have been, maybe 15 years ago, I would have been a little uncomfortable with that. I've been one of those people who, go to Sierra College for a day, and then I need to go back to work. I had to pay the bills. And then you end up with your own business, and you got to be, you don't ever have that chance to go back and do what a lot of you are doing right now. And so I felt uncomfortable about that. I felt uncomfortable at times when we went from, you heard the story, 30 million to, or 3 million to a couple hundred million. Well, along the way, you're faced with things that you have no idea what you're doing, and you're the CEO. What are you supposed to do? That can make you uncomfortable, and you try to play the part. I need to play boss or play CEO. But when I realized that, I can remember at one point I'm trying to work through, I was so nervous about leading people that I was relying on other people to do what a CEO is supposed to do. I was leading from the ivory tower instead of down in the trenches. There was a time when I had 30 people walk out and go to a direct competitor. That will teach you right away you have to be a hands-on leader. But the reason I didn't lead was not because I didn't want to lead. It was because I was afraid to lead. And so as I developed the courage to be a leader, be more comfortable in my own skin, our business, my family, I think in every area of my life improved when I said, you know what, I don't know everything. And we heard earlier when you're going for a job interview, you don't know everything. But you know what? A point of view is worth 80 IQ points. All right? If you know stuff, I knew stuff. It doesn't matter what I didn't know. What I did know is that I can surround myself with good people. That's what I did. That's what I'm doing tonight. I see three of my teammates right there. That's what I know now. I can do that. It's okay that I'm a C student from Oakmont High School because I know how to get good people around me.
Aaron, before we move on to your response, this is where the homework part comes in. I haven't seen any pens scribbling down questions, so this is your opportunity. I'm just going to give you a little reminder. So I get to be in school, but you get to join me tonight with a little homework problem. So get out your note cards, and if you have a speaker that you would like to address that question, please put their name on it. Otherwise, we're going to lob it to them, and they'll decide between them who's going to take that one on. Aaron, if you would.
Advice to my younger self. Well, I feel like I barely qualify to answer this question yet, right? But I'll throw out a few. I think, first of all, I started working for my dad at the age of 12. He knew nothing about child labor laws or minimum wage laws, so it worked out really well for me in the afternoons after school. Probably at about, 20 years old, I was itching to start something, and so did a startup. It was very unfocused, but a couple years later we had built some interesting things. We sort of sold that off to focus in a different direction, and then did that. It was frankly it was a lot of education, and it was probably an expensive education. In hindsight, it felt cheaper than a real education at the time. But I would just say if I had to go back, I'm not sure. I mean, I can't really complain in any way, shape, or form about sort of the path that I've taken. But if I look back, I would say I would probably go try to find an entrepreneurial company and work in that company. Because I think that would have been a huge education. It would have taught me a lot more, a lot faster than it did just trying to sort of start something on your own that was a little bit unfocused. I just feel like I would have learned a lot more, a lot faster. So I would go work for an entrepreneurial company. Another piece that I've learned over time is that building a startup and building a company are two very, very different things. And so I think we kind of got that one right this time. But we once we sort of proved things out and things started growing, we actually got really purposeful about building a company, building an organization. Doing training. Today I taught our mission and values class to a new class of riskalyzers who joined, and that's something I still do, day in and day out with new people who come aboard, because you're building an organization, not just building a product, which is sort of what startup life is all about. And then the last thing that I would go back and tell myself is when building an organization, building a company, there's literally nothing more important than communication. I joke that my job feels more ceremonial than anything else these days, because I just sort of go from team to team in the company and spend time communicating and talking about where we're going and how we stay in alignment and how we head in the same direction. The other thing we did today is every 6 weeks we shut down the entire company for an hour and a half to do what we call team lunch. In the early days, team lunch was really easy. I would go out and get like 3 or 4 sandwiches, and then we'd just all sit down and talk, right? And I always like to say the easiest organization in the world is the single person organization, because there's total alignment and total communication and absolute collaboration, right? When the cells begin to divide, things start getting a little bit more complicated. So, I've had people ask, good heavens, like, you really shut down the whole company for an hour and a half to go sit in a room, and now it's in 3 sites, and we do video broadcast across the 3 sites, but like, you do that, and yeah, it costs us like $25,000 or something like that, and that's just in payroll. That's not even the lunch, right? But it's worth it, because we have to get our people on the same page, and we have to be rowing in the same direction and have the alignment to be going in the same direction. So I would go back and tell myself, like, you cannot over communicate when building a company, when building an organization.
Jennifer?
Me again. Honestly, I thought about this question, and there's nothing that I would tell myself, because all of your experiences lead to who you are. And that for me has been very true. I've worked in Europe, and I've worked in San Francisco, and I've done menial jobs, and I've done executive jobs. And in all of those, I have said, God, what do you want me to do here? And some of them have lasted a long time, and some of them have lasted a few years. And I wish I had words of wisdom that I could go back, but honestly, take every experience you have and tuck it in your belt and use it, because you will become an amazing person at the end of that, gathering all those experiences together and learning from every one of them. So there's nothing I could go back and tell myself, because I just use all the experiences I have in my current situation.
Excellent. Jim?
Last but not least, it's always hard to follow all of my colleagues here. There's 4 things I'd like to highlight for this answer. First is be diligent, conscientious, and dependable. Work hard with an emotional component or commitment. Follow your passion. Man, everybody should know you really love what you do. And I have to admit, not every job I've had during my career I absolutely loved, but most of them I did. If you don't like what you're doing, find something that you do enjoy, because it makes a difference in how you conduct yourself, if it's just a job or if you have a passion for it. It shows, and it should show. The second is cultivate strong personal relationships, respecting everyone, empowering subordinates. We were created by God as social beings for His fellowship. So it makes sense that we're very relational, okay? So make sure that you work on personal relationships with your colleagues, with your superiors, with your subordinates. Very, very important. And I can't stress enough, respect everybody, especially those that work for you. Boy, the tyranny of the urgent, when you got deadlines or you got things that went south on you, it's really easy to react because you're trying to hone in on an objective and things aren't working out right. So make sure you treat your people with respect. I can't begin to describe the leverage that companies, big or small, have when they respect those individuals. And Aaron hit a good point in terms of how he relates when he's giving this basic training course and missions, or whether he shuts down the company. Communicate to them that you really do care, all right? It goes so far, and it's worth way more than cutting around the edges and saving a little bit of cost. Third, develop your team and don't care who gets the credit in meeting objectives. Man, oh man, your job, particularly in a big organization like mine, is to make sure your subordinates get promoted. You are the key to their success. So don't care who gets the credit. Just make sure the job gets done and that the people that really contributed to it, and there always are many, many more people than yourself, get the credit. Finally, character counts. Strive for integrity and accountability. Reputation is what people think of you. Character is what God knows about you. Make sure that you conduct yourself in a way that's beyond reproach as much as possible. So important for us as Christians.
Thank you so much. So I have quite the mixed bag over here for you. We can all take a second to take a deep breath. They're great. They're just kind of all over the board. So as I promised, I'm going to lob this to the group. There are some where I'll call out an individual's name. Certainly that doesn't prohibit anyone else from answering. But given the time that we have, we'll look for primarily one answer. But please, everything that you've shared tonight is so impactful. If you'd like to contribute, please jump in. I probably don't have to tell any of you
Are
that.
you looking for a 3-minute answer or a 3-second answer?
I'm willing to let this one be open because I think reading some of these, there's some that seem like they might be short and sweet, but I don't know necessarily your answers. But I'm really excited to get started. So here's one that we'll start with because I just think it's darn interesting. How do you deal with a situation where you make an unpopular decision and your employees don't support it?
It's never happened.
Don't everyone jump in at once.
You've got a great company there.
Yeah, where do you guys work?
I'll just say, a part of our company, I mean, we're a small company, there's 15 of us, so we're not huge, but we're mighty. We have an extraordinary reputation in the industry. So when I make a decision that is unpopular with our employees, it's easy for me to gather them all together and say, you know what, we're doing this because we want to help our we want to help our growers. We want to help the people that are out there buying our system, and we want to, help the industry grow. And I explained to them why the decision was made. I don't make random decisions. I, like Aaron, am very conscious of the fact that I have these people's lives and livelihoods in my hand. And I let them know that I care that much about them, that this is a decision that will take the company to a different place. And as a company gets to a different place, they all have profit sharing and they all have, great benefits that come out of it. So I try to explain the situation to them, and usually that works.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
I can jump in on that. I'm thinking back to the financial crisis. Company had been going great for a long time and had to make some unpopular decisions around pay, which is tough. We'd already scaled back in 2007, knowing and paying down debts, trying to strengthen the company. And then Lehman Brothers files bankruptcy in September of 2008. And I think at that time, my brother and I looked at each other and said, we have to do something. And so we restructured the pay. We brought in our senior leadership team and came up with a plan to restructure pay into what we called a good to great bonus program, but where everybody took a pay cut, where our benefits got scaled back, and we ended up losing some, shut down the training department. We shut down some things that were all of a sudden fringe benefits. But what I think what helped us through was communication and over communication. We had been doing that, fortunately, where I had got my guts and was very, very hands-on in a leadership role, and I had been for a number of years, and that served us well. But through that crisis, we had weekly meetings where we talked about the health of the company. We talked about what that meant, and it was weekly communication with the entire company, and we had like 300 employees. Well, we had dropped down close to 200 by that point, but daily communication, even with the ones in the remote location, with every leadership personnel, and weekly with everybody on the team. Because at that time people were worried about, am I even going to have a job, right? Circuit City, they're in the Good to Great book. They're filing bankruptcy. Lehman Brothers, and a number of the rest. Everybody we had to calm the troops and let them know that everything was going to be okay. So we faced the brutal facts, made the changes, and over-communicated.
You want to take this one?
I'll just throw out. I thought those were great answers. We teach this thing called the Disagree and Commit framework, And that has been really helpful inside of our company. So the idea is we don't do autocratic decision making and we don't do committee decision making. We try to find a balance between those two extremes. And so we appoint a decision maker for every decision. And then a lot of people contribute to the decision, but they're not the decision maker. It's not a committee, right, that makes decisions. So what we ask all those people to do who contribute to the decision is to both disagree and commit. So we say you have a duty to voice your disagreement if you disagree. You don't get to go ahead and be outnumbered at the meeting, and everybody's going around the table saying we should do A, we should do A, we should do A, and then it gets to you and you really feel like we should do B, and you just sort of be quiet. Like you are denying the company the benefits of your intelligence if you refuse to say, well, I think we should do B and here's why. Okay? So we say you've got a duty to voice your disagreement if you disagree. Then, once the decision gets made, you have a responsibility to commit to the decision. And particularly one of the ways, what that looks like in our organization is you then go back to your team and they say, so what did you decide? And if, what I found is humans have this annoying tendency, if the decision went their way, they say, well, we decided, blah, 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 blah. And if the decision didn't go their way, they say, well, they decided, blah, 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 blah. And what we train our people from day one is, if you'd have told me last October when we had 90 people that we would have 200 people today, I would have laughed at you, okay? So I have no idea how many people we're gonna have a year from now or 2 years from now. But I do know this, I need all 200 of you who are in our organization today to be prepared to be the leaders of our organization tomorrow. Not necessarily managers, not everybody wants to manage people, but I need you to be the leaders of our organization tomorrow. And how can you be a leader in our organization if whenever a decision doesn't go your way, you say, they decided? Because what you're communicating is that you have no influence and authority in our organization, and that's actually not true. We asked you to sit at the table and contribute to that decision. And I think that has really helped us to build a culture not of people unwilling to speak up, because they do voice their disagreement, sometimes vociferously, when they disagree with me, right? But willing to turn around then and commit to the decision once it's made and we're able to move forward together.
Just a quick response. I think what each of my panel colleagues is talking about is absolutely spot on in terms of communication, in terms of collaboration, collaborative decisions. But I think there's one element that you need to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, it's still possible that either you can't communicate everything you need to because there's sensitive information or things that they aren't privy to, or you've just got to make a hard decision. I mean, that happens. That's reality. That's real life. But I really do believe if you're the kind of leader you need to be, and if you have the kind of relationship with your subordinates that you do, there's going to be an element of trust, okay? And it won't be absolute. You're going to make mistakes. But the fact is, if they know your thinking processes, they know that you've got their backside, that you really support them, and that you're a straight shooter, you're going to have a lot more chance of success in them buying in than if you just are a dictator. Okay, so I think it really goes back to what kind of a relationship you have with your employees and what you've done in the past, because it isn't an isolated incident, and it will happen, no doubt about it. You're going to make an unpopular decision.
Thank you so much, everyone. Phenomenal answers. Great question. All of these are phenomenal questions. Jenny, this one's for you. This individual shared a statement first that raw character shines through as we wrestle with failure. But what this person would like to know is, how do you suggest someone bounce back from failure? And how personally does your faith guide you back to success?
Gosh, so how do you bounce back from failure? As a Christian, and again, you heard I went to Point Loma. I've been a Christian my whole life. My brother's a pastor, was a pastor. I have a long heritage, which I'm so thankful for, of Christianity in my family. My aunts and uncles are Christians, and they pray for me daily. How do you bounce back from it? The only thing I can say is I seek God. And let me first of all say I've made some really bad decisions in my life. I've made mistakes. But you seek God and you say, okay, God, here I am. And I can't do anything about what that is other than to come to you and say, here I am, I'm seeking your wisdom. I pray for wisdom and discernment every day. It's very different when you have people who are dependent upon you for their livelihoods. So I am very conscious of that and the responsibility that God's given me. So how do you come back from failure? You say, okay, God. I mean, there have been times, I'll be very honest with you, in the past year after Scott died, that I didn't know if the company was going to make it, right? We're a small company. We have a great name in the industry. People assume we're a huge company, but we're not. We're few, but we're mighty. And Scott was the face of the company. And so I'm like, God, what did you bring me here to this point to have it all fall apart? What's the purpose of that? And the purpose is to lean on God. And I just ended up saying, God, I am here. Like Esther, the story of Esther, how do I know that I wasn't put here for such a time exactly like this? God, I'm here, and if it falls all apart, it falls all apart, but I will still trust you. I mean, that's really the only way I can say you can come back from failure. Sometimes it's humiliating. When I took this job, it was humiliating. It was a job, like I said, but beneath me, as I thought. But it has led me to something that I am passionate about, and I love what I do. I love what our company stands for. I love going to visit, farms across the country and around the world. I love what we do. So, did that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Jim, the next one's for you. You have an amazing career. We'd like to hear the thing out of all of those accomplishments that you're most proud of.
Can I add a postscript to what Jenny said? Because I guest lectured at a couple of Christian colleges, and there's always two statements that I like to leave with my undergraduate students. First of all, that discouragement and setbacks are a normal part of life. I mean, again, that's reality, folks, and the Lord does use those. The only time I often pay attention is when I'm at my lowest, okay? But there's two statements coming from the secular world that I think are very helpful. The first is, good judgment is usually the result of experience, and you know the rest. Experience frequently the result of bad judgment. The other one is, a person becomes wise by observing what happens when he isn't. So we learn from those things, and that's, I think, what Jenny's been saying. Okay, of all the things that I've done that I'm most proud of, first of all, in fact, I was talking with my wife about this and not knowing exactly what to expect. I said, as I look back on my career, and it was pretty much linear in air transportation, but as I look back on my career, there's very few things that I orchestrated myself, very few opportunities. And I don't mean to over-spiritualize it, but that, if we were designed for a purpose, with a purpose, the Lord's in it, okay? He's sovereign, and he knows what we're best at, and he wants to use us to our best ability. So very few things can I point to and say, boy, you hit it out of the park on that one. Yeah, you work hard. Yeah, you use opportunities. But the Lord is working behind the scenes, and what a marvelous orchestrator he is. The one thing, as I look back on my 30-plus years at Boeing, we faced a situation in 2001, before 9/11, where one of our major products, the 747-400, was nearing the end of its economic life. We usually plan for about a 20-year economic life for airplanes. And when we do that, we have a $1 billion investment, only it's usually $10 to $15 billion. And we have to make the right decisions in terms of what requirements will be built in, what capabilities, what new technology will be incorporated in those products before we come to market with it. And we better get it right. We don't have a chance to fail. There's too much at stake. So the VP General Manager of the 747 program up in Everett called me and said, Jim, we've never met, but I've heard about you. You're the senior guy in your team. We've got 45 days. I want you to put together a meeting of the CEOs of our largest customers, and you know all of them personally. I want there to be geographic representation. I want there to be different carriers represented, but I want you to choose 25, and we're going to meet, of all places, in Napa Valley. This was in the spring of 2001. and we're just going to go off-site, and I know it's going to be tough to get onto their schedules, but you know them all personally, so I want you to convince them it's the right thing to do. And we're going to start the process, and we're going to devote a whole day to it in a casual environment and start talking about what after the 747-400. Make a long story short, in 2005, we launched one product, the 777 Freighter, and in the spring and then in the fall, we launched the 747-8 Freighter. And to date, we've sold about 250 of those machines to airlines all over the world at about $300 million a piece. So it was a very successful, very taxing. We had about 12 to 13 meetings, some of them every 6 months. A lot of egos involved, a lot at stake because, you know, of the 25, each one had their own ideas of what they wanted. I had to bring in product development, product strategy. I had to do a lot of offline lobbying of customers. But at the end of the day, we've had a lot of success with that, and I'm really pleased that the process worked. And I had a tremendous team to support me to do that because we met all over the world. We met on every continent during that process.
Thank you so much. This question, for whomever wishes to take it, is what's your process for going about learning something new? I'm going to add a little caveat to that, which is, as the leaders in your organizations, you're supposed to know everything about everything. So information is coming at us at a faster pace than ever before. And tactically, not only how do you go about learning something new as it might pertain to your leadership or your business, but how do you just manage the information that you need to run your firm? Who wants to take that one on?
Let me jump in there because I had to learn everything about agriculture. So let me just start there real quick. And I'm totally hands-on. And I don't know who mentioned you have to be a hands-on leader, but you do. You have to know what you're doing. And I'm hands-on, and I'm out in the greenhouse every single day. I'm out in our warehouse and manufacturing every single day. I can manufacture one of our tables. I can manufacture some of our channels. I know how to grow. I regularly take customer calls, grower calls, because we offer grower support. I regularly take grower calls so that I can talk to them and understand what are their pain points and what kind of information are they asking. So I very deliberately get down kind of in the trenches. And that's how I do it. I'm very hands-on, and I get down there and know. And when I don't know, I contact Stephanie, talk to Joe Schwartz, who is our vice president, and he's probably a top leader in the entire industry of hydroponics. And if I don't know a question, I FaceTime him, and he's used to getting my FaceTime calls and asking what a question is. But get in there, learn, get down there. Don't sit in your ivory tower. Don't sit there behind your desk and make a decision. Get down there and learn what your customers are doing and what your employees are going through.
Great. Anyone else? No?
Okay, I'll share real quick. So what I do, information, I put young people around me, first of all, so that I can get the latest and greatest about what the world looks like through their eyes. But I have 3 specific people that help me with each of the areas of my business world. One, relationships. Lauren is my relationships person. I have Tammy, who helps give me the information for all the businesses and all my investments, and so she works through the president of all of our companies to help me gather all that information. And then another person that helps me with radio show content and things associated with that. So I've kind of found a way to break it into 3s, and then there's presidents of each of our companies, so I have direct access to each of these. These are my business partners. I talk to them all the time.
Excellent. We'd like to hear, and we've heard a little bit about this, but we'd like to hear more about the biggest risk that any of you have ever taken.
Successful or unsuccessful?
Yeah.
Either one. I can't repeat the quote. Can you read the quote again about experience and what you learned from? So both would be appreciated.
So I have a radio show. So some of you know that started about a little over 2 years ago. And we talked about differentiation. You want to have a differentiation when you do anything. Any business needs to hopefully have some differentiation, maybe some competitive advantage. And we decided on our show that I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to share stories about my life. I'm going to let it all hang out. So it was my wife's birthday, and I had written her a song, and I sang it on the radio in front of in front of all of Sacramento. It was highly risky. It was a crash and burn. It was risky. I will not sing it tonight. My wife
Encore,
was very
encore.
happy. So there was one little benefit out of it, or one huge benefit out of all of it.
That is not what I expected to hear, and I love it. I know that you said earlier, shock 'em, and that's great. Like, I love it.
I feel like I have to answer this question with a company called Riskalyze, but
I think you were required, yes.
gosh, there are so many that I can think of, and we've made our share of mistakes along the way, but we've gotten a few right. And I would so we started the company in 2011 with this mission, this passion that we felt like investing was really broken for the average person. That our psychology tends to sabotage us as investors. When the markets are going up, we feel optimistic, we put more money in and put more risk on. Then when markets go down, we start getting fearful and we make really bad emotional decisions and we sell at exactly the wrong time. Then we wait until the market feels safe again, and then we buy back in at the high. And we sabotage ourselves as investors. And so our passion was to create technology that would empower people to be fearless investors. And so we set out in 2011. We started building all this technology to understand how much risk somebody can handle, and build a framework to help them understand it and react to risk appropriately. And so our thesis was, great financial advisors are not going to road test brand new risk technology on their clients, right? So that's just not going to work. So we went out in 2012 with a really simple free version of the product that we targeted at like the $25,000 E-Trade kind of customer. And that was actually really, so I call 2012 our year of successful failure, right? So the success part was, we got great PR, users come in, they build like $2 billion in portfolios on the product, they love it, they're using it, they just love this risk number thing and how it works. Our way of monetizing that is we're going to go to like one of the 5 big discount brokers like E-Trade and those guys and get them to license the technology to sort of wake up and make their customer base know what to do. And suffice it to say, like, I don't think we would have accomplished what we've accomplished as a company without having done 2012, but in hindsight, there were only 5 prospective customers on the face of planet Earth. Right? So like very quickly, Schwab, Fidelity, and Scottrade said, oh, we don't really partner with outside technology for our retail platform. And then E-Trade was like a financial basket case, was nearly sliding into bankruptcy in 2012, almost lost their CEO again that year. So they wanted to do the deal, couldn't get the deal done. Then we kind of got the deal with TD Ameritrade. And at the 11th hour, I'm like in Baltimore at one of their offices, and we have our champions in the room and we have our enemies in the room, and basically the enemies win, and they're like, oh, there's no way that our technology can talk to each other until we finish this massive rebuild of all of our stuff internally, so we can start your project in 4 to 6 quarters. Which in big company speak means 10 years, right? So, so we had 3 months of money in the bank at that point in time. So that was a long plane flight home. And somewhere I still have the page from my notebook where I wrote the great question that Gene Kranz asked in Apollo 13. What do we have on the ship that's good? And so I wrote like great core technology and $2 billion of validation. And that was all I could write on that notebook page. Like, this is literally all I could write. And so that was like Labor Day weekend 2012. I called the team and said, okay, we need everybody to come to the office, which is all 4 of us, on like a Saturday of Labor Day weekend, because I'm a really great boss. And so we sat down and we said, look, if we're going to go down, let's go down swinging. We went back to our investors and actually, I'm sorry, before that, we started building the product for advisors, just rebuilding the product for advisors. We just said, maybe we've got enough validation that they'll trust us and go out and use it. And about 3 weeks later, we had a working prototype. It was very ugly. But there was this conference coming up in San Diego, and that's only like $100 ticket, so that's not too expensive. And I was kind of like stalking this famous advisor who was on CNBC every other week, whose name was Josh Brown. And I was like, I really want to show you this really cool thing, and blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, show it to me at the conference. So like I went to the conference, I found him at the conference, tracked him down, and as he put it, I finally just harassed him into like going into the next room and showing him this. Well, he just fell in love with it. Like he just loved what we were doing. And joined our advisory board, just like jumped aboard as like one of our first customers. And we were able to go back to investors and say, hey, we don't have a lot of fire yet, but we got smoke, and we think we're onto something here on how to monetize this technology. And they stood behind us. And it was tough going, but March of 2013 was when we rolled that advisor product out of beta, and it just sort of took off like a rocket. And that's 4 years ago. We've gone from 4 people in the company and 0 customers to over 200 people. I think we're just crossing 200 people in the company, and we serve 20,000 plus financial advisors. So I look back at that and go, like, the risk that we took in sort of betting it all on the financial advisor was huge. But the big thing that I learned from that was that companies don't fail, they just kind of quit. And we just wouldn't find our quit. So that's why we're here today.
Great story.
Thank you so much. So I'd be remiss if we didn't ask this question to you. How do you balance work and family?
Not very well. I've been married 41 years. But I always tell anybody that asks that question, and it has been asked before, that I'm married to an angel. But I talked earlier about my own personal accountability, not because I felt I was slipping, but just because I felt it was a thing to do. It really did help us to keep in touch no matter where I was, because traveling to 85 countries all over the world all the time, it's tough. But there was a trust element. I could keep up on things that were happening, and literally, really, with all the time zones and date lines and all that stuff, it got pretty interesting on trying to arrange, when am I going to call tomorrow? But she knew that was the case, and my kids also. And what really was helpful too was to be able to take my kids and my wife on business trips periodically. I remember one distinctly when I took my junior high daughter at the time on a trip to Tokyo with me. And she got home, and usually they were, I don't know, anywhere from 5 days, 7 days. They weren't real long trips. But when you do those almost every month, they are taxing. But she got home, and here she's in junior high and good health. She looked at me when we got home, and she said, "Dad, now I know why you're so tired all the time." I thought, yes, mission accomplished. But it really does, it really does take a team to pull it off. And it hasn't been perfect. And I remember a time when I went into work, and one of the VPs called me in, a sales VP, and he said, "Jim, you're going to Taipei today, and pack your bags." And I was in the air literally 3 times longer than I was on the ground in Taipei. So you never quite knew where you were going, but you knew it was important. You knew it was significant. I tried to keep them informed, my family informed, kind of what I was doing, if they could understand it. But, and my wife used to say, "I'd rather have you on the road loving what you do than at home miserable." So that's why I go back to what I said earlier. Find what the Lord's got for you. Find out what your passion is and go for it. And like I said, you're going to do jobs you don't really love, you don't really like, but the fact is he's made you for a purpose. So try to find what that is and go for it. Just throw your whole self into it.
That's fantastic. So we have only about 5 minutes. I'm going to just go through a few more questions, one responder each one, to get through a few more. But we really want to leave the last half hour for you to be able to talk individually with our guests tonight. I think this is a great question. I don't know anyone who hasn't faced this. In my job, which I love, I'm often overwhelmed, and I don't have enough time to complete all of my responsibilities in 8 hours. What's your advice for balancing alerting my boss to the issue and toughing it out and doing my best? Who'd like to take that one?
I think that's a very honest question and an interesting and tough question. If I were in that person's shoes, the first thing I would do is I would look to my left and look to my right at the different people doing the same job and ask myself very, very honestly, like, is my output at least equal to, if not more than their output? Okay? Because the last thing I want to do is go into my boss and say, I can't fit my work into 8 hours a day, and my output is lower or not like at the top of the charts, right? Like, just being very honest, like I wouldn't want that to happen in my communication with the person that I work for. Once I've gotten past that, I don't know, that goes back to sort of the whole work-life balance question, and we encourage our people in our organization to communicate with their bosses if they're struggling to manage that and to balance those things. But, you know, to be perfectly candid, and it hasn't happened often, but once in a while, it will be the person who is the lowest performer on a team who will come in and say, I just cannot figure out how to, and usually that means that they need more training, they need more help to get there, and we really try very hard to give them that training and that help. But it may be that you want to, if you're not the highest performer in that role, that you want to change your question away from how do I fit the job, you know, basically why can't I get this done in 8 hours a day, to can I get the resources, can I get the help, can I get the training to be better at this? Because I feel like I need to be better at this, and I feel like I can be better at this. Because I love it when people ask that question. I will tell you, it is the world's most expensive thing to fire an employee. You have invested thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in training them and trying to make them elite at what they do. Anytime one of the people in our organization comes to their manager and says, I feel like I need to get better at this, we love that, because, you know, that's where managers sit back and go, I need to do whatever I can for this person because they're willing to do whatever it takes to help us win.
Excellent. Mark, there was a question for you, which is about company culture. What's the most important piece in creating a culture inside an organization?
I always think of the culture as the culmination of the way everybody thinks, right? The values and the philosophies of the team that you have, of the people in the organization. And I think it starts with those first few people, with the leadership of the team. And I think they will shape that. So I think if you bring on, I think I've seen it multiple times, if you bring in the right people at the onset, then the culture will sort of emanate from those people. We have a saying, we try to throw a party that people want to come to, and that means everybody gets to pitch in and help with the party and make it fun. So I think if that's what you look for in people that can blend, even though they might be have respect their differences, of course, because you need different people on the team. But I think having that common goal brings people together to the party. So I don't know. I think it starts with those first few people.
Excellent. So with just a few minutes left, I'd like to give each one of you your last chance to share your best insight, or the one thing that you simply cannot leave this room without everyone hearing tonight. You've shared such tremendous wisdom. I know we're all blessed because of it and grateful for your time with us tonight. But we just want to give you the chance to thoughtfully share that thing that may be on your heart that we need to hear, and then we'll move right into time with those that are in the audience so that we can have as much one-on-one time with our guests as possible. Who'd like to kick us off?
I'll start. One thing that has helped me for the last 30 years is find someone that you can look up to. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily someone you know. Maybe it's someone in the business world, and you can look up to them, you can look at their career, and you can say, that's where I want to be. In my case, it was someone I knew in a completely different industry. And you've heard that, what would Jesus do? I jokingly asked myself, what would Ann do? She's someone I have known. She's quite a bit older than I was. She was superintendent of the school district in Santa Rosa, and a kind person and a wise person and a solid Christian. And she always would give me little tips like, when you have a meeting, bring See's candy suckers and put them on the desk if you have important information, because everyone will take one and put it in their mouth and they won't talk as much. So find someone that you can look up to. So that's what I would say.
I am going to do that See's candy sucker thing. And if you come to one of my meetings, I apologize in advance, because you'll know exactly what's going on.
See's Candy is going to have a huge sales month.
Just a spike.
Yes. I'll go back to what we were talking about with work-life balance. I'm the dad of 3 kids, 13, 10, and 8. I don't get those years back. Doing what I have the opportunity to do, it's a very intense job right now, and I love my work and I love what I'm doing there, and so balancing those two things is really hard, and I haven't always done it well. I've made a lot of mistakes there before, and one of the things that really I'd say there's 2 things that kind of changed my perspective on that, and at least helped me do it better, a little bit better. One was a book, which I highly recommend, and it's got a crazy name for this topic, but you'll get the picture. It's by Andy Stanley, and it's called Choosing to Cheat, okay? And the idea behind the book is, a lot of times we cheat on our families for the purpose of our careers, and what if we flipped that a little bit, and we just cut a few corners that you can cut, right, for the sake of investing in your family. Like if you think about it through that kind of framework, you're already dedicated to your career. You're investing a lot of time of it. But if you can get out of work at 4:30 that one day, is it really going to kill you if you leave at 4:30 and go home and invest in your kids and your family one time? You can't do it every day, but can you do it one day? That's Choosing to Cheat. So it was a really neat book, and it really changed my perspective and helped me a lot. The other thing was just realizing that God puts you in different places with different missions at different times. And so right now, I feel like I've got to boil it down to 4 missions. I was on the Sierra College board for 12 years. I loved it. I really enjoyed serving with those people. They were awesome people. But I just came to a point of going, it's time for me to that's a piece of mission that I need to let go of, because I need to focus on what's happening at work, what's happening with my family, and then we have our nonprofit that I serve in, and then I want to serve in my church. And those are the 4 places where I can spend time. And if it's not one of those 4 things, I can't say yes to it. Having that kind of being able to let go of things, even if you love them, to focus on the mission that God has for you at that place in time, I think has been really helpful to me to help sort of get me back to doing each of those 4 things well, hopefully.
Mark or Jim, who's going up next?
You go, Mark. Go ahead.
What comes to mind, you think about a guy like me, C student, had a little bit of success. I believe in a philosophy called yes if. If you walk into my office, we call it Mark Tank, because people are always pitching me ideas, and that's why I do my radio show. And but if you walk around my office, you'll see above, it's dry erase boards all around. Above the largest wall, you'll see something that says yes if ... And to me, that means anything is possible if you do enough of the little things. Anything is possible. So yes if is kind of a mantra, and so we got to do what we love. We have to go all in on what we know. We can't do it halfway. We have to be different. We got to take some risk. But I think the other thing that's been helpful for me, especially when times get tough, is to remember my why and live my why, and don't lose sight of what the reason why I do what I do. And for me, after we sold our companies, I found myself help with the transition. I found myself sort of unemployed for a little while. Had a couple of little investments, and I wrote a mission statement, and that mission statement, for a lot of people, a mission statement is, it's kind of like wetting your pants. It feels nice and warm, but it doesn't really do anything, right? But for me, my mission statement is, I have that tattooed to my soul, and when you walk into my office, you can look around and you can see what matters to me. You can see things that my children and my grandchildren have given me that remind us of our bond, the mantras that are important to both of us, to my daughter and to my son who was in the military. He was shot in Afghanistan, and I think to myself, when times get tough, what would Marcus do? He's okay, but he was shot in Afghanistan. I think, you know what? What can I do? There's people out there that are doing things well beyond the businesses that I'm involved in, and it's like, what can I do? And it reminds, if you have those people in your life, if we have those people in our life, if we have those mission statements in our life, those symbols in my office, it's like stuff sitting around, knickknacks and things. I invite all of you to come out and check it out so you can see what I'm talking about. But I guess my advice to you is, remember that anything is possible, but never lose sight of why you're going after it.
I think what everybody's been saying is God first, family second, and work third. I think it's a matter of obviously putting priorities in the right order, but as I look at the number 3, work third, I think it's also important to invest in people. And obviously, you have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior. That ought to be your absolute number 1 priority, be it on a church board or however you're teaching Sunday school, whatever it is. Number 2, your family ought to be intimately involved in whatever they're involved in and know them very, very well and spend time, from somebody who was on the road a lot. But third, at work, really invest in people. And I have found it very helpful to kind of remember details about different people. Now, Boeing's got 200,000 employees all over the world. But the way it's structured, it's relatively in small groups. And we have a lot of sales directors and marketing analysts that I interface with all the time. But I tried to make an effort to get to know them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But maybe where they went to school, maybe what one of their family members, what they're interested in, whatever. So try to invest in them where it's appropriate. Some people don't like that too well, so you just kind of have to read them a little bit. But try to express interest in them. And that goes back to what I was talking about relative to respect. If they know that you value them as people, they will run circles for you. I had so many times I really got to know the administrative office people when I needed to get things done, because like any company, you're really dependent on others to do a lot of things. And they knew that I wouldn't cry wolf. If I asked them to do something, it was really, really important. And I never jerked their chain when I didn't need to. And oftentimes when I needed something done and I went to them, they would drop everything else because everybody else was crying wolf all the time and jerking their chain. And they knew that if I asked for it, so sometimes I'd have to call them off and not do something. But have a relationship with them of integrity, of honesty, being transparent with them, and a little personal with them too. It really goes a long way. When people know that you respect them, that you value them, they will do everything they can to support you. And it's fun to do. I think it's honoring to the Lord because you have opportunities to witness and to tell them your testimony, but it's just the right thing to do. It makes for a much, much better work environment, and you can get a ton of things done you couldn't otherwise.
Thank you so much for all of your responses and all of your time tonight. Just a couple of closing remarks for you before we circle up into our small groups that we'll have this evening. First, I'd like to say on behalf of American River Bank, we're just so privileged to be here as the sponsor this evening. I get the wonderful joy of working with CEOs every day because we're a business-only bank. And listening to all of you just makes me think of what we're in the business of doing, and that is helping businesses grow. So thank you for your time, because we know that our communities are strong only when our businesses are strong. And so helping serve you is really something that we find a great privilege. So thank you for allowing me to do this tonight. I want to say again, thank you to Santi. Round of applause for him. This is his brainchild. And he put a ton of work into it. And then, of course, Dr. Strombeck for everything he does, not only for the business school here, but the vision this man has for where this school will be. I think you said it, where we've come from and where we're going to be in the future. He has a tremendous vision that he's building, and he puts his heart, soul, and everything he's got. He leaves it on the field. So, Dr. Strombeck, thank you for everything you do for us. What I'd like to encourage is that if each one of you would kind of take a corner-ish area, instead of a receiving line one-on-one conversation, if you could huddle up, MBA cohort style. And that's brilliant. We'll bring the rest of you food. I'm happy to shuttle food to you. That way, the benefit of the one-on-one conversation or the questions you might receive can be received by everyone.